Today we get to talk about the direction of Warcraft's future lore. It has changed, it's going in an unexpected way, but honestly, I think it's a good way, and a lot of people in the PTR look excited. Dimensius is in fact the capstone villain of the War Within. And for many, the shocker is that we're actually teaming up with Xal'atath to fight him. And that means that the simple narrative mathematics we've done in the past has been a little thrown out the window. So, today, we've got Xal'atath, we've got the return of Ashara, the other side of Azeroth, and all the colossal lore that's about to catapult us into the Midnight expansion. Now, before we begin, you've got a golden opportunity to get yourself geared up with UGREEN's Prime Day sale. Now, they're my personal go-to accessory brand. They're this video's sponsor, and they sent me a big old haul of goodies. And it's all deeply discounted too, up to 46% off with my links which are down below. So here's how I'm going to use it all. First, this is the 65-watt foldable gallium nitride charger. And this little guy is great. Basically, it's my everyday carry one because it's light, it's tiny, it's got 3 ports. Best of all, it's foldable, which is a really satisfying to fidget with. As is this, actually. This is the 2-in-1 MagSafe wireless charger. This thing's awesome. It'll actually charge your phone and your AirPods at the same time, and it's got a side port for your watch as well. And of course, they all feature overcurrent, overvolt, overtemp, and short circuit protection. And basically, right, I get all of the charging that I need in the same volume as my old single Apple charger, which is kind of wild. As for the webcam, that's going to live in my home setup, and well, look at this Mac Mini dock. This thing is awesome. It's got 5 USB-A, 2 USB-C, card readers, and an NVMe enclosure, which does kind of mean I've now got no excuse not to build my home media server, because it was always planned to be using one of the new Mac Minis. Ah, boy. Okay, but the point is, these are all awesome, and now they're essentially cheaper than ever. You can get the best deals by going straight to the Prime Day links, which will be in the video description. A big thank you, of course, to UGREEN for supporting this channel. First, Xal'atath. We've got to talk about Xal'atath, and I'm actually going to do a full, massive breakdown of her soon, but what's key to understand here is that she's no longer the Harbinger of Dimensius. She actually hasn't been for at least as long as we've known her, and more likely, she hasn't been the Harbinger of Dimensius since the fall of Koresh, which we now actually know happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. And that's funny, because when you think about it, the only people who have been calling her Harbinger this whole expansion are basically the people that she has been taking advantage of, and us adventurers. She never outright said she was Harbinger, and yes, we did find the old staff, but that staff, you know, the Harbinger's one, well, that was a relic from a very long time ago. So it's safe to say she was the Harbinger of Dimensius, just that she's clearly no longer. But really, it has been in front of our eyes the whole time. We actually went back to when Ansarak killed her mother. That was a cinematic we saw before this expansion even launched, and in it, the old queen called her the Harbinger. But when she did, Ansarak screamed that her name was Xal'atath, a rejection of the Harbinger angle. And then, when we fished in Dalaran's fountain during its destruction scenario, we got a rusty coin, one from Xal'atath, something that seemingly has been down there for years, and that had the phrase, "the soul of your world in the palm of my hand," inscribed upon it. Not our hand, as in me and my boss Dimensius, but my hand, Xal'atath's hand. So it's pretty clear she's been working her own scheme, and that's what brought us to, of course, the ethereal betrayal in patch 11.1. Xal'atath wanted the Darkheart. She was absolutely planning and doing something with it. Illyria absolutely thwarted that plan, but then in patch 11.1, the ethereal stole it from right underneath her. We of course knew something was off because we'd seen the Shadowguard and Xal'atath working together. So there was a question then, who went rogue? Who betrayed who? Were the Ethereals doing something untoward? No. It very much seems that Xal'atath is the one who betrayed the Ethereals, and that they originally had reclaimed the Darkheart for their master Dimensius, but that Xal'atath was always planning to in fact use it for her own purposes, meaning that when the Ethereals went and nabbed it in 11.1, that was them staying on mission, and of course leading to this patch. And that means that Xal'atath's betrayal goes way back to when Dimensius was defeated in Koresh's explosion. If she was the Harbinger of Dimensius at that point, which we believe she was, that would mean that whenever he was defeated and then fragmented, that she was then able to hide out and start working her own plan. Because it is becoming obvious that she is more cunning than Dimensius and will do anything for her freedom. And that's what brings us back to Midnight, because I think it's clear that she will make a more fitting villain than Dimensius ever could. So, we've got Xal'atath's betrayal. It's now time to lock in what else we know about the Midnight expansion. First, it was called the ultimate clash between Light and Void, and that Chris Metzen said the deciding fight between the two will happen at the Sunwell. And this does make a lot of sense, because the Sunwell isn't just a font of arcane energy. You see, after it was corrupted by Kael'thas, Velen then cleansed it with the light, and by cleansing it with the light, that actually opens it up to being corrupted by the void, because light and void are two sides of a coin, as we see in Naru with their whole flipping between their two different states. Now, of course, the Arathi, who we've met in the War Within, have been banging on all expansion about their holy flame and how it's part elemental, part light, part arcane, that Bellular is kind of the same. And of course, we're often watching Bellular go into its void state in real time. Now, the funny thing is the last time that Illyria visited the Sunwell, the void, within her, couldn't help itself, and it actually erupted from her body. It tried to take the Sunwell. That's actually why Illyria was banished from Silvermoon. That's because all the way back during the Legion expansion, after Illyria assumed her void form, Xal'atath said that the caterpillar had become the butterfly. Basically, Zal has been running an angle on Illyria since that expansion. She's clearly been playing her, and it seems that game will end at the Sunwell, as was foreshadowed by the last time Illyria visited the Sunwell. What happens then? Well, if we go deeper into the story of the Sunwell, we discover interesting things. One of them being that to protect what little of its power remained after the Scourge ravaged the whole place, a red dragon named Corielstraz siphoned its energy into mortal form. And this mortal form was a girl called Anvina Teig. Yeah, the WoW comics were a little bit weird. Don't say her name in my local country of Northern Ireland. You might get a slap from people. Anyway, that energy is now back in the Sunwell, but it shows us that its power can actually be put or channeled into an individual. Now, I don't think they'll go and regurgitate a bunch of old comic lore, but it is worth thinking about, because that sort of thing could very much be Xal'atath's goal. We've already seen her essences being transferred twice, once of course into the blade, and then into her current elven body. So maybe the next step is into the Sunwell itself, maybe from the Sunwell into the World Soul. Whatever happens though at that final climactic moment, I think we won't be fighting Dimensius. I think it will be Xal'atath. The question is in what form, because we could be fighting a Xal'atath who is truly ascendant with the total power of the Sunwell. But it may not only be her, because it's very clear she's not our only candidate villain. The other thing we know for sure is that the last Titan will come after the Midnight expansion. We were of course told by Iridikron how that would go down, because it's core to his plan, that the Harbinger will tear Azeroth from the Titan's grasp, and that they'll return to claim their prize, and basically that's when he will want to gank them. Now, the War Within is telling us that their return is not necessarily a good thing. You know, all of the weird sus Titan stuff we've seen. And that means that the Titans will do anything to reclaim Azeroth, including, of course, destroying us all. And that opens up the opportunity for another alliance of convenience with Xal'atath. But okay, that's what we know for sure. Now let me ask you a question. If this is, as Chris Metzen said, the ultimate clash between light and void, and we are seeing all of these void things, right? The void marshalling its forces with the Shadow Guard, Dimensius, the history of the old gods, well then there's an obvious question. Where's the light in all of this? Where are the Naru? Where are the Silver Hand? What happened to Yrel and her weird light empire over an alternative Draenor? I think the answer is fairly simple. If you're looking for the light in all of that stuff, you might be looking too far away, because the answer is right in front of you, right in front of us, and it could be bringing us to the other side of Azeroth. Let me put it like this. Dragonfly had hinted at two future expansion locations. First, Khazalgar, second, Avalorn. Those were the two places teased at the very, very beginning in those Titan notes that we found. Obviously, Khazalgar did become true. We're in it right now. But what about Avalorn? It's weird for Blizzard to tease a place name like that and never really go to it. That's certainly not their modern MO. Well, of course, we know that Midnight is the clash between Light and Void. Take a shot for every time I say that in this video. But in that very same BlizzCon, and now of course in the actual expansion, we see Hallowfall, and we find these people from the other side of the planet whose whole mission is to fight in something that they call Renalash, which they also say is the clash between light and void. Now, their empire is, we believe, on the other side of Azeroth, and their emperor, given visions by the light, sent the Arathi that we've met as an advanced force to secure Bellular. So, what next? I think it's fairly obvious. The final war, this big clash, and it all points to one of two things. In Midnight, the Arathi are going to show up to our side of the world with a massive fleet, likely ready to defend the Sunwell. They'll probably think it's Renalash and they have to come and do their part. But to be honest, so far, we are hearing that they're basically light extremists, so maybe there's a chance that they'll try to fight us for the Sunwell first. Now, the other option is that Renalash will bring us to the other side of Azeroth, and certainly when you listen to these Arathi NPCs and you hear what they're telling us about how it is back home, that's certainly not beyond belief. One example, General Steelstrike knew what an old god was, and that does point to Avalorn being the potential location of the all but confirmed, or at least heavily speculated upon, 5th Old God. But then deeper than that, we know that the Arathi have also been fighting the Naga for centuries. And that brings us to the other big antagonist of Midnight, the other character with huge potential, Queen Ashara. Ashara's return has been foretold since the beginning of Dragonflight, and that's not me doing weird fluffy words, literally they're in-game prophecies. Back in patch 10.0.7, we found a Naga prophecy telling us that Ashara would be coming back, and that prophecy stated that a primal power, which we now believe is a Ridicron, wanted to end order. Of course, the Titans. We also learned that a hunger lost to the ages, which we now know as Galakrond, would be reclaimed, which of course we saw in Dragonflight. And that finally, a dark heart left broken awaits the taking. Well, the broken dark heart, after Illyria clinged it with the arrow, was just taken by that ethereal in 11.1 and is now in Koresh. And that means we're at the end of that prophecy. On the Siren Isle, the Naga we found told us, with their dying breath, that Ashara was about to return. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident that means Ashara will be back in Midnight. Remember, the last thing Ashara told us directly was that she was done dealing with intermediaries and heralds, and that she wanted to find the true throne of power. Then she yeeted herself into a void portal. We don't know where she went, but wherever it is, she probably did what she did best, claimed a shitload of power. Now, with the Midnight expansion, she's returning to, as the Naga put it, rule over sea, sky, and earth, which actually gives us 3 options for Midnight's capstone villain: Ashara, the Arathi Empire, or Xal'atath herself. That's a lot of possibilities, so let's bring them all together. We're obviously going to the Sunwell for the final clash between Light and Void. Dimensius will be mostly out of the picture, and that will leave us with 3 solid options for who we're going to be fighting. First, the Arathis. If we're to believe Farron and what she says about her people, they basically are not as open to outsiders and those who they consider to be different. So we can't guarantee that them, even though they are agents of the light, that they will be on our side. Perhaps they won't be an end boss, but if we do end up in Avalorn, we may find ourselves on the wrong side of their politics. Second is Queen Ashara. This is perhaps the most obvious pick for an end boss. Blizzard have also said we're reuniting the lost elven tribes. Queen Ashara considers herself not just Queen of the World, but in particular, the Queen of all elves. Obviously now that's the more fishy Naga variety, but yeah, it does mean all elves. And even though we had a brief alliance of convenience, I mean, come on, it's Queen Ashara. You can look at her every act through the history of this IP. She's not going to be our overall ally. And then, of course, most intriguing is Xal'atath. Her story with Illyria is barreling towards some sort of climax with the Sunwell, but we're yet to know what side either Illyria or Xal'atath will be on, or even what Locust Walker has actually got planned for all of this stuff. There is a chance that Xal'atath has been playing the deepest long game imaginable, that she could be trying to free our world soul from the Titans and thus give her free will or something. Alternatively, and maybe the most obvious, she could just slurp up the power of the Sunwell and use that as a connection to the world soul, maybe to do a body swap with Azeroth, making Xal'atath suddenly the most powerful being in existence, which, would be quite the way up from being trapped in a dagger by a bunch of bizarre octopus people, which is, how she probably spent the last few 100,000 years. Now, bringing all of that together then, it's fairly clear that Midnight has more moving parts than we ever thought, And with patch 11.2 just around the corner, I think we're soon to find out a lot more of who our real villains will be. And by the way, there is something important to say. Now, I'm going to expand upon this in a new video like in 2 days' time, but you should know it. Basically, whenever Chris Metzen returned to Blizzard, they were a fair bit into production of War Within. A lot of things were basically locked in at that period. And it very much seems that the World Soul Saga's overall influence is something that mostly impacts how they bent the War Within that they had at that point of time, and then how they developed some things like War Within patches, especially, of course, what we're seeing now with Koresh. I think that with that context, the idea of them rushing through the War Within so they can actually set up the, big Midnight and Last Titan stuff makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of that is reflected in the lore that we've just discussed in this video. And if you want to understand more of this from the actual game design perspective, you've got to watch this video next, because Ian, the game director, basically owned up to loads of the things the team were doing wrong on a systemic level for years.